today's topic is about manuscript writing. So, um, ano talaga siya, like, parang culmination, although hindi pa to ang end. We still have a lot of webinars up for you guys. Kasi we found na, some of your research classes, you're not learning all of these things na you need to learn. So, we hope na at least we can help you out and, help you learn about these things for you to be able to pursue, perform, and write your research. And we really want you to have this experience, of what it's like to be a scientist as early as you are in high school. So from the beginning, yung mga beginning lectures was about like how do you identify your topic, to we've had like literature review, to like how to design your experiments, how to analyze your data. Tapos now we are in writing again. Well, we like, yung literature review, parang writing siya, pero like at some point talaga, I know a lot of you haven't started writing yet, and it's totally fine. Like manuscript writing and just writing your paper in general is very important to think about na even before you have started performing your experiments, even probably even before you like start thinking about your research in. So that's why today I uh, also would be talking about um, like before you begin writing, while during the time you will be writing, and after you're writing. And during the time you're writing, then it's gonna be divided into sections. So before you perform your experiments, while you're performing your experiments, and after you're performing your experiments. So before you begin writing, all of this has been like talked about in the previous lectures. John also did a lecture on this. So basically, it's just thinking about your study design, like your study in general, and how might that look like when you have like your finished paper. So you just think about the most important things like your hypothesis, your objectives, your like most important and main methods. What are the resources and the materials that you need to be able to do those experiments and perform those methods. And the very most important thing, and this is something that is emphasized to me even while I was in college and now working, is controls. So what are your positive and negative controls? What variables are you working on? Think about those, but the most important are the controls. So is this also feel free to let me know if I'm going too fast, because I tend to speak fast. But interrupt me at any point, guys, if any of you have any questions. John, feel free if my question was a chat or anything. So yeah, good. So next thing is to identify your reference style. And this will also identify kung ano yung style na gagamitin nyo in terms of how to write your manuscript. Kasi all of this reference styles rin, may different ano rin sila, like heading, yung like different levels of heading rin, ganon. Um, Actually, I realize hindi ko to na-cover dito kasi it's pretty long. But I just gave like a brief like table here kung anong topics or fields. Oops. Anong topics or fields. Nakikita niyo ba? Wait, i-try kong i-laser. Oops, no. Laser pointer. So anong topics or fields yung different kung anong topics or fields ba based yung ano nyo yung yung study nyo, ano ba yung style. Pero I think in the Philippines, we mostly use APA. So, I know kami ni John, mano-mano tayo. So, even up to now, like, I still like manually like reference my style, but what reference my style? Lol. I still manually cite my references. So it's important to learn lang rin how to manually cite. So the most common ones are MLA for humanities. Pero meron ring mga sciences na gumagamit ng MLA actually, especially when it's like a popular article or article for um, like how do you say this? how do I say this? Basta merong mga conferences rin na MLA usually. APA is the most common. This is yung common, wait, this is yung pinaka-common sa schools, especially in high school in the Philippines. I think APA kami. John, APA rin ba kayo, I think? um,
Yes, we also use APA.
but yeah, and in college rin, APA rin yung thesis. Yeah, yeah. So, I think APA, yung ano, yung DepEd requirement. I don't know, pero yung, I think yung like, um, yung mga competitions usually APA. And then, another one for history and humanities is Chicago. Tapos, meron ding another type and other types for other sciences rin. Pero these are like not very common. Like, yung pinaka-common talaga itong tatlo. And then ito lang, like, what do they emphasize on? So, yun, like, meron lang like hindi naman significant differences, pero kasi yung style, if I didn't like put a sample kasi it's too crowded na. But if you look this up, like if you click on the links later, and maybe we should have like a like referencing or citation lecture later on. We'll think about it. But if you guys want that lecture, because we're not sure if that's being taught to you in school, but if you want that lecture, just let us know or let your mentors know so we can like give you guys a tutorial or a lecture on that. So you can check out like the links later on. I will send this slides to John Rin, and then and to your mentors. Your mentors will be able to get it, or you can also get it lang rin later yung mga slides. Um, so if you click on them, you will be able to see how do this how do each reference style are like. So yung ano lang like when you go through like a page of references, meron siyang like is it like the authors? How do they list the authors? Yung name, ganito ganyan. So meron siyang ganun. Um, but yeah, like nakakatakot siya at first, honestly, but it's really important, guys. So and it's a really good skill to learn. So just take it slow and learn how to reference. And if you are not sure, you can ask your mentor, and you can ask us if we should be doing a lecture. But another thing that you can do is use a reference manager. So during the Skills Quest, Dr. Carmela shared about Mendeley. There are a lot of different kind of softwares now na you can use for references or formatting your paper. And this includes like Bible text, meron din yung latex for to format your paper. EndNote, Mendeley, you learned about Mendeley. Meron ding papers, RefWords, Zotero, everything. But I think ang pinaka um, popular among these are Mendeley, Zotero, and Bible text right now. Pero, and I also heard na Google released their own rin recently. So you guys can Google that up. I'm sure na kasi mga techie rin kayo. So later on, you can just like click on these links. If at some point you think you would need like a tutorial on this, let us know kung anong tutorials rin would be helpful for you guys. So those are all for before you begin writing. So during writing, so finally like you've identified those things, anong gagawin while writing. So during writing, it's also important to think about the structure. This is probably even a before writing type of thing. But so ang common structure in writing, like for a manuscript, is it's called IMRAD, and this is because it's introduction, materials, results, and discussion. Pero like if you really look at it, everything it would be title and abstract, introduction, materials and methods, results, discussions and conclusions, references, tables and figures. Pero when you're preparing all of this, it's not really na you prepare them exactly in this way. Kasi, when you're preparing your research, usually you would have your materials first, you perform your experiment, tapos you get results. So you have like your tables, figures, yung mga calculations nyo, tapos yung results. So thus you will be able to analyze your results, interpret it, write your discussion conclusion. You can also write your introduction beforehand, but then later on, baka may mag-change, ganon. So you also review that later. Tapos yung title nyo and abstract. Abstract is always the last one. Tapos yung references is throughout. So this is just a suggestion about the order of how to prepare all of these different parts of your paper. Kasi, but when you actually arrange them later on, you arrange them this way. Kasi you have to arrange them in a logical way, diba? You kind of have to tell a story. Science and research is not like, it seems like it's critical thinking. Yes, you have to have like, you have to follow a certain logic, but it's really also about creative thinking. So you have to creatively tell a story. So you introduce like, why did you do your research? You give the story about like, oh, like why is it important? What are your objectives? So, and then you share about like the methods. What did you do to get there? How did you get there? And then when you got there, like what did you find? So yung results nyo, and then what does your finding mean? Like how does this change things right now? So yung discussion and conclusion, tapos references is just, to again acknowledge all of the previous work that has been done in tables and figures. So I hope that makes sense. But in terms of writing this all out, there are suggestions for before your experiment, while you're doing your experiment, and after you have finished your experiments. Para naman hindi like kasi most of the time I think most people would write, I mean at the beginning, or like at least when you're in high school, you don't really like think about writing that much. So you would usually just write after your experiment. Tapos nagka-cram usually. So there's a lot of things nag happen that way. So the best way to write your paper would be to break it down into all of these different parts, and then think about what you can write on the side, what you can write a little on the way through the entire process of also performing your experiment. So before your experiment, so materials and methods, I also just put down like what is a question you could ask yourself, while you are writing this different sections. So the first one is materials and methods. So the really important question is, how do I make my work reproducible? Kasi the reason why you're writing your materials and methods is the very obvious reason is just, oh, because you have to present what you did. But then it's not just about that, because science and research is a cyclical process, diba? Like you have to continue to, like, later on when you find your conclusions, there's always some way to improve something. There's always some way to, like, later on yung conclusions might not even lead you to answers. It would just lead you to more questions, to like more specific questions. So you have to like present your materials and methods so other people can perform it. Other people can see na, oh, would they get the same results if they perform the same exact experiments, or if they perform the experiments, for example, and tweak something, like what is different. So, that's how science is like. So, the really main question as well, and this is a question that is not very obvious, especially like as early researchers, is that you have to think about how do you write and present what you have done in a way na other scientists, other people can also perform it. So firstly is you have to be clear, specific, and then when you do lab work, especially, you put like quantities. If you do like computational work, you put like how many hours with specific like data and stuff, and then you use approved nomenclature. What is approved? So most of the time, I mean, unless you are developing your own method, most of the time you also just follow the method that has been released previously, diba? So you also look at like ano ba yung guidelines ng author from before. Also, as always, use like international standards. standards of like metric system. Kasi that like those like measurements are really important to specify kasi yung mga differences in measurements or misunderstanding or unclear measurements has led to very costly uh, experiments, very costly things back then. I mean, not just back then, probably even now, because America, they still use the imperial system. So another thing is to specify the source of the material, especially if you're working in a lab, tapos you are working with chemicals, yung mga chemicals, reagents, they might have like a specific like producer, batch, model, specific brand, if you're using a kit, for example, so yun. And if a procedure is well established, then you can just like reference the original method. Like you don't have to list the entire method. You just say, oh, we performed this. Let's say, for example, what are sample stuff? Like PCR method or specific pyrolysis method or um, staining method, for example. So, ganun. Any questions so far? Wala. So I will move on to during experiments. So I think some of you right now are performing your experiments or performing your studies na, your surveys, whatever your experiment would be. And just something to think about, while you're doing your experiment is also think about these things. Your results, when you get like results, when you get data, when you get like what do you write in your notes, for example. So or like when you get like spreadsheets, so you think about like how do you present your data. I think you have already had your lecture on how to analyze data, like present data, interpret data, but this is just like to give you a summary again. So whether to use a table or a graph or an image. So table is, if you have like the data in a spreadsheet, you make it into a table with only the most important variables. But if it's not really that important, you just put it at the end. You put it as supplementary material and you have to give it a title. And how to format all of this would again depend on your reference style. And graph or chart, it has to be clear. You have to make sure you have labels. You have to make sure you have error bars. And this is probably this probably doesn't seem like really important right now at this stage as early scientists, but later on these are very very important, especially for lab experiments. And another thing you have to think about is kapag like the chart or the table doesn't really add to anything. Like if you can just like explain your result in simple sentence or few sentences, then you probably don't need to put the table or the graph. So you also have to think about whether you even need to put these things because nag-add siya sa pages niyo. And sometimes you might think, oh, it's the longer the better, but scientists, they don't have time to read everything. So you always have to think about how do you present your research, your story in the most concise way possible rin. And an image, if you use an image from online or that is owned by somebody else, but if it's owned by you, that's the best. But if it's owned by somebody else, you have to check if they would allow you to use it. And then you have to label it appropriately depende rin yan on your reference style. And then you have to provide like yung source. So like where did you find it? Where did you get it from? Ganon. So next one is the results. So the results are also very tied to your figures. And it's just good, that while you are getting all these results, while you're getting all of these tables, you also just try to already start writing like ano ba yung different parts ng results nyo. Like you can even just have a bullet point. But the thing is, the things na you have to keep in mind is that how do you make others understand your results? So always think there needs to be a logical flow. Sometimes you might perform your experiments like in a different way, like yung methods, you start with something, uh, let me think of a specific experiment kasi not all experiments are the same, no? But um, basically, like, there might be times na you perform something, tapos that will not be the first thing that will come up in your results. Something else might come up first. So you have to think about like what is the best way, what is the most um, organized way to present a logic of your results. So as I've shared here, order is not necessary. You have to organize it in paragraphs with the subheadings according to the reference style again. Uh, Always present all of the data in the current paper. Because sometimes you think, oh, I can do like a follow-up study after this. I'll just like present this data later. But like you really never know, you know. So always present everything that is relevant now. Because it's the experiment right now. Also, sometimes time might, be a factor that could affect your experiment, or yeah, like a lot of different factors could be like could like affect the like later on if you present your um, results to a late future paper. It's kind of sketchy. um, if you're using large data sets, especially right now if you're doing like surveys, for example, and you have like hundreds of respondents at surveys nyo, you don't have to put all of that, the table, in in your results. You can make like charts or figures for that, and or just like even write a little about it, and then just put the link to that database for later on. So, but yeah, so but don't put like the entire like 100 people like in a table. Uh, and yes, don't forget your statistics. Like how is like the accuracy of whatever, what was your central tendency, your mean, median, or mode, depending on which one would you like to use, which one is appropriate to use. And I've shared that before sa previous lecture. I think there was also lectures about that, or you learn it in school. And like your hypothesis testing then, if that is relevant and important. How do you determine if your sample size is good enough, and how do you like, um, you have to present if your results are statistically significant or not statistically significant. And then discussion. So, what do your results mean? So after this, you also have to think about like, oh, like, do your results make sense? Like, you can't just like take it at face value. So you have to interpret it. You have to compare it with the previous published data. Like, ano ba yung different? And then you also have to think about like, how does it support or oppose the initial hypothesis? So yun, if like it's statistically significant, if it's not significant, what would that mean? And then how would you go forward? Like sometimes this also includes the recommendations, although like traditionally they wouldn't like I think like traditionally in Philippine high school before, like sinaseparate in yung recommendations to, improve, or what are the limitations of your study na bakit ba like ganito, like different yung result nyo, ano ba yung difference from other studies that has been published. So yeah. And if there is a disagreement in your findings, so like if hindi um, how do I say this in Tagalog? Hindi siya pareho yung yung results nyo from previous published data. Like you think about how do you explain this? Like ano ba yung limitations nyo? Ano ba yung something different? Ano ba yung like potential, like if everything is similar, for example, tapos hindi pareho yung result. So like maybe one of you made a mistake, no? So but then what if it's not you who made the mistake? What if it was like the previously published paper? So that's a really important finding rin. So you have to explain as well. You have to think about why do you think your your message was right, or maybe both of them, both of what you did was right, and like both of the results are right. So it's really, science is just that. Like it's really interesting. I think a lot of people kasi think about science, think about your results as, oh, like hindi pareho yung results ko from previous findings. Like we always think that, oh, we failed. Like it's a failure now. We got that result. Um, and I used to always think about it that way until I got into college. Tapos, one of my supervisors said na there's no really such thing as a failed result in science. It's either yes, maybe you did something wrong, or that's just what the result is. It's what you found. Kasi science is just a process of finding what's in nature, diba? Finding out if something will work or not. So it's also important to think about it, and to not always kind of feel discouraged if you get negative results or results that you didn't expect. Yes, another thing is that if you don't understand, if you don't like, if you don't kind of understand why your results are that way, um, yeah, just like don't speculate more than what you know. Try to understand, of course. Try to review other papers, other results. Try to ask other people what your results might mean, especially experts, for example, or your mentors or supervisors. But just label na you're not sure, for example, if you're not sure. Another thing is to keep in mind like yung yung label ng causation. So this was something that I didn't learn when I was in high school. But correlation is not causation. So if you're just performing a correlation, if you're not like performing a causal study or a causal inference, like you're not performing a causal statistic, then it's not, you're not proving a cause. So always just label it, oh, there's a positive association, negative association, positive correlation, negative correlation. But you don't say na something caused something if you're not sure, if you didn't perform a causation, a causal statistic. So I hope you guys remember these. I think right now it would seem like, oh, these are a lot. That's probably not important right now, which is, yeah, it might not be that important right now, but these are things that will be really important later on. So it's a good thing to practice. And yes, again, name future steps for required for later on, like what new questions rose up while you had your findings. So, what would be the step forward? So, yeah, you also get to discuss those in this part. And then conclusion. So you ask yourself, what is the summary of my findings? So I think a lot of people, this is a really important part because a lot of scientists or like people who would review your paper for competitions or um, uh, like conferences, they usually would only read the conclusion right away, like abstract and conclusion. So this is like your final paragraph. You have to like put the impact here. Usually, this is the final paragraph of the discussion, or usually it could be like a separate section. Um, and yeah, you always should think about the last paragraph of your introduction when you're writing your conclusion. So either you already had your introduction or you write your introduction later. But these two kind of go hand in hand because you have to think about what were my objectives back then. Were the objectives met? If not, why not? What was the hypothesis? Were your results statistically significant or not? And what does that mean? So you just summarize the most important things here in 1 to 2 paragraphs. After the experiment. So after the experiment, you can write your introduction or you can write it ahead as well. Tapos, you just review it and rewrite it, edit it after you do your experiments. And the most important thing to ask here really is why did I or you guys do this study? So why did we do this study if it's a group? And this is a part where you get to present the context or the background of your study, provide like what is the problem that you are trying to address here, in a bigger sense, or like even the specific sense that you are a specific level or perspective that you are conducting your experiment. Make sure that you have all of your keywords and concepts, and then also talk about the significance of the study, like what is the like the, I don't know, the societal problem, for example, this is related to, or like just a specific problem that you're addressing in your study. So why did you do this study? Why is it interesting? Ganon. And then the last paragraph is where you always specify your objectives. So you always write, this study aims to, this study endeavors to, blah, 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 blah. And that last paragraph is as important as your conclusion. And it's important, again, as I shared, to tie up your conclusion to that part of your introduction, to your objectives. Because you want to tell a story, right? So you want to tell like, like the ending, like give a closure to your study in a sense. Uh, and then the next part is the title page. So this is where um, kind of you put, did I put is the summary of your findings? Oh, yes. So it's kind of like how do you summarize your findings in one sentence or like one like phrase? So it has to be short, it has to be specific but not too technical. It has to be like about the result mostly, than like, you know, your like context. Sometimes it could be your method as well. So like for example, this one, flavonoids X increases Drosophila lifespan versus effects of flavonoid X on Drosophila. Ganon. So it has to be the result. So effects of flavonoid X on Drosophila instead of flavonoid X increases Drosophila. Does that um, make sense? I hope you guys remember that. If not, you can always go back to these slides. And then it should include the main keywords. So like if people look up your, um, like look up in the internet, for example, about this specific like field or area or application, would they be able to find your paper? Would they be able to find your study? So you would want to include those main keywords. Abstract. So the end, you write your abstract. That's really the summary of everything. All of you know, you've read a lot of abstracts. So I think when I think about the abstract, I think to myself, like, how do I share my study in 5 minutes? Like, how do you, like, you get in an elevator and like, how do you like share about your study to people? So that was what an abstract is. And then I think about a good abstract, it should stand alone. Like you could read the abstract and understand briefly the entire thing about the paper. So briefly summarize the background, the results, and then advance in knowledge. Like what did your study contribute to that field? And then it should include all of the essential keywords, so that for searchability later on, or in your library as well, or like your school database. And don't put in like uncommon things like very fancy words, like abbreviations or technical terms na people won't easily understand. So don't put that in the abstract. And then references. So as I've shared, this is something now you do and think about throughout your entire paper. So when you always have to think about how do you acknowledge previous work when you are um, writing or doing your study, because you know you always like there's like you always like base everything, like you structure your study based on other people's work, and so you have to acknowledge, you have to attribute what they have done before as well. And this is to avoid plagiarism because plagiarism is very, very huge and very um, important. It's a really huge offense, especially outside of the Philippines. Like, this is not uh, something we really learn in the Philippines, at least in high school. So I just want to bring it up again. So use an appropriate software. I've shared some softwares in the previous slide. And Mom Carmela also shared how to use Mendeley before. Choose an appropriate style or format. So maybe you can ask your teacher if my required ba siya na format. You can ask the school, or you look into like yung requirements of the conferences or competitions na you want to join. Like if they require any specific format. Usually it's APA, but sometimes they would just like say MLA or Chicago. So always check what format. Pero the reason why it's good to use a software is that later on kasi it's very easy to just um, convert your the style that you use to a different format if you use a software. That's why we really recommend using a software. Although it's also good to learn how to do it mano mano. Uh, Cite primary literature whenever possible. Whenever you like share something na was from somewhere else, something that you didn't think of, always cite it. But even if you already know the definition of something technical, like still find somewhere or like where is the like a definition, like a broadly recognized definition, or like who like invented that something or founded something. You have to cite that. Cite published articles in peer-reviewed journals, and avoid citing unpublished work. Although since you're still in high school, I think it's relatively okay. You can cite unpublished work. You just put unpublished in the reference. But yeah, again, if it's not yet submitted, or if it's in a uh, pre-print services. There are some pre-print services na like they submitted it, but it's not yet like accepted in any journal. Try to not cite those, but at this point, I think it's fine. But just for future reference. And acknowledgement. So this is also a good part of your paper. It's kind of like that part where you're like, finally I'm done writing because I reached this part. And this is just a nice way of thinking like how far you've come, from all those months now you performed your study, and all of the people who has helped you get there. So this is the space to thank people na like don't necessarily have to be in the author's list, like your research teacher, kasi you're the one performing the study. Like, so you don't have to put your research teacher as an author. Or like your mentor, for example, like us as your SIDHI mentors, like we don't have to, and I even think should not, but I just say don't have to appear in the paper unless like we're doing significant work or you're doing like a mini project under us, something like that. But this is just a space to thank everyone who helped you out, um, provided reagents, constructive criticism, everyone who helped you like proofread, review your paper. You can also mention here grants, like all of the places na you got grants from, the government, like this hackathon, this place here, competition. Now you got like some grant funding, something like that. You can also thank your mentors, family, friends, etc. So yeah, I'm like, even I like reading the acknowledgements right now. I feel really relieved because I've been talking for quite some time. Does anyone have any questions so far? Anyone? Just blurt it out. I hope you're still there, guys. I cannot really see you. I cannot like move my slide. Anyways, so I'm just gonna go to the last part. Let me drink like a tea first, quickly. You guys relax for like 1 minute. So after writing, finally, you've finished writing everything. Is it the end? Not really. You have to think about like read through your entire paper, proofread again and again, ask other people to read it for you. Because sometimes when we're reading something again and again, and especially if it's our work, we sometimes like overlook some things, like tiny details now we might not catch, right? I think a best people to also ask to read or review are experts. So your mentors, for example, or even if they're not exactly an expert, like if they're like a scientist or professional, let them like read the paper. As all scientists naman know how to read a paper, so they can always give you constructive criticism. Check for grammar and spelling, whether like specific words or phrasing are better than what you have written, to improve your style. Again, you don't have to be fancy. Like scientists, we're not fancy. We're like cut to the point, um, straight to the point. Actually, straight to the point and cut to the chase. Like we're direct with like we don't like share once upon a time type of stuff. So we just be clear and specific and concise. No plagiarism. Avoid plagiarism as much as possible. And how to do this? There are a lot of um, softwares online or web-based places online where you just like copy paste or upload your paper, and then it will automatically check if there's anything plagiarized, for example. And yes, you probably have already done and done a lot of things to make sure that you didn't plagiarize, but just in case, like always, you double check, triple check. Um, and also like run it by a native speaker if you're like publishing in English, or you can use a English service. Editor service are really expensive, but like when you're working now later on or in college, I think sometimes the lab you're working for might have the fund to like have it edited. But for now, you can use Grammarly. Like Grammarly is pretty good. You can, I think as a student, you can use it for free. It's also for free, actually. But there's a premium version that you can use for free if you're a student. Um, and Grammarly, you can use that. Uh, um, yeah, to like check out how your grammar is, but it also actually has a automated plagiarism detector, so it would also detect in case you might have plagiarism. And just the last part I wanted to quickly discuss because this is pretty long. um, so just make sure na you avoid plagiarism. And how do you do this? You do this by um, knowing the difference. This is the basic stuff, okay? Like difference between quotation, paraphrasing, and summarizing when you are writing your paper and you are basing it from other people's work, other papers. Ganun. So um, again, like the best way to do it is to summarize. And this is, I think this has been shared way back, previous lectures ago. When you summarize, you just put the main ideas, you write it in your own words. And when do you use this? When you only need the brief overview and important details. When you And how do you do this? You just condense and focus on the main points. And then yeah, you can see a sample here. I wrote it this way because the top-down approach is that this is how it will look like in the paper. This is how you paraphrase, and this is how you like a summary would look like. And the summary is like so much shorter. It would be like 1 to 3 sentences of an entire paper. Uh, but it's always put in text citation and use whatever format that would be. Uh, and then yeah, and then paraphrasing, you use it when is when you like put a passage into your own words, um, and you use it when you need to be more detailed in a summary. Again, like a summary is always preferred, but there are times now you might really need to put more details. So you change like the organization, the wording, and the sentence structure with the end text citation. But then you have to recognize that that is paraphrasing. That's not your own work. Like you are basing it off from someone. And quotations are identical. Like you just basically copy paste the exact same things, put it in quotation marks, and put the in-text citation. And you use this when you need to comment on something specific. When you, for example, there's a part in your results na is different or the same in another paper, you can either use like a paraphrase or a direct quotation. But you always say, oh, like this is in I don't know, in last name's paper, let's say in Smith et al. 2017, that like they did the study and like shared their results as quotation mark, blah 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 blah. So I hope this helps you guys. I hope you yeah, like again, avoid plagiarism, proofread, and yeah, let us know when you're writing your paper, before you're writing, when you're writing, and after you're writing. If you ever need help, your mentors and SIDHI are around to help you out. So I think this is all. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Okay, guys, do you have any questions for Florence?
And maybe you don't have questions right now, which is totally fine because I'm pretty sure na not a lot of you are already, writing your manuscript. So if you have questions later on, you can always comment or direct message us or ask your mentor, and your mentor might be able to answer or ask us, the presenter, if you had any questions.
Uh, yeah, and I think also the presentation is kind of comprehensive and clear. So yeah, again, if you don't have,
John, do you think there's anything I missed, ba?
uh, I I don't think so. I think you covered the entirety of a manuscript. I think, yeah, from the title down to the acknowledgement, and including the bibliography and how to write it. I think everything is there. Although,
Mm,
yeah, if
thank you. Yeah. But yeah, if you guys go
yeah,
on.
I think if they're going to publish their papers in the future, or yeah, different journals have different styles of writing, so you might also,
Yeah,
actually not
yeah,
style, formatting. So down to the font, down to the
yeah.
spacing,
Formatting.
so you have to check that as well, I think.
And the number of words, the number of pages.
Yes, usually the abstract
Even
is
like
300
sometimes they
words.
also like, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, um, always just ask like what style or format is the appropriate or preferred one, either from your teacher, from your school, from the competition, the journal that you will publish at, or the conference you want to attend. Ganun. So, um,
Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
so
any questions? I
mhm.
think someone went in just now.
I think it's
Like
Jess.
everyone.
Yeah, one of our mentors.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Hello. Well, no worries. So yeah, if you guys have any questions later on, feel free to just let us know. But I think we're good for now, John.
Yeah.
Or
Yep.
is there
Okay.
anything that you want to be?
Yeah. Again, this lecture
Thank you,
has
everyone.
been
Have a good night.
lecture has been recorded, so we'll just going to post this, and then if you have more questions about manuscript writing, so Florence is really willing to answer all of your queries. Okay, so good night, guys. Thank you for being here.